Welcome back to the Wingspan Podcast, episode 24. I'm Doug Barak, joined by my co-host Chris Mahala and Nets Daily, and our special guest. Our guest is the Senior Vice President of Creative Strategy and Partnership Marketing with Roc Nation.
We welcome Elisa Padilla to the podcast. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to join Doug and I. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm thrilled to be here with you today.
Of course, glad to have you on.
Of course, glad
nice
to have
to hear your
you
voice
on.
again.
Likewise.
And I guess we'll kick it off by saying what you've been up to since COVID-19 put the world at halt.
Well, COVID-19 definitely turned the world upside down in March. So I joined my current position at Roc Nation the first week of February. And the last week of March, after being in my job for 2 months, I was furloughed, along with, at that time, there probably was 3 million people on unemployment. So the last 2.5 months have been, pretty difficult just in terms of the uncertainty of not knowing when sports and live events are coming back. So I've been keeping busy doing a few things. One is reconnecting with my network and reconnecting with people that I haven't spoken to in a while. And the other thing that I started was an initiative on IG Live, which is a lunchtime conversation, Kick It by EP. And it's an IG Live that happens every Tuesday and Thursday at 12 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where I have guests join me and they share their story. And it's only a 20-minute conversation. And at the end, we're able to share their career insights. So from an audience perspective, people walk away knowing a little bit more of the guest, but also get some career tips and insights based on their success. So I launched that, I think, like the second week of April, and has been going very well. So I'm really pleased with that initiative to date.
It's wonderful to hear.
That's wonderful to hear. And then one follow-up I have for you as well is, like many of us, have you seen any challenges, at least with the work that you do, from switching from mostly virtual nowadays instead of doing in-person work or any of that kind of thing? Has it been more on a challenging side in your position?
No, what I can tell you is that before I was furloughed for 2.5 weeks, we worked virtually, and the productivity was not affected at all. On the contrary, everyone was leaning in because this is such an unprecedented time for so many people that, we wanted to make sure that we were pushing the business forward, that we were showing up. So I don't think productivity has suffered. And from my colleagues who are currently still working, the feedback that I've gotten is that productivity has gone up because people aren't commuting, people are at home. There's a lot of barriers that, pre-COVID was affecting people's productivity, and it seems that those have been pushed to the side since so many people are working from home.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And then to dive a little bit to, I guess you could say, beginning to dive into your career first, you're very accomplished in the field of marketing. So could you please take us through that journey and kind of like what your first job was to where you are today, kind of highlighting your journey and any type of, mostly just your overall journey to where you are today?
Absolutely. So, well, thank you very much for that acknowledgement. I have been very blessed with my career. I started, my first job out of college was as a marketing assistant for the New York Knicks. And back during the glory days, when they went to the Eastern Conference Finals and I was in Houston for Game 7 when John Stark shot 2 for 18. I was very, very lucky back then to have that be my first job. And the person that I worked with, who was the head of marketing, was an accomplished woman who I really, really admired. And I did some research on her background, and she had her MBA in marketing. So after spending 4 years at the Knicks and really learning everything from marketing, from the fundamentals from her, I decided that one of the things that was key for me was that I wanted to go back to school to get my MBA, and I wanted to have a diversified marketing background. So during my time at the Knicks, I was recruited by Disney. Disney was opening up their Disney's Wide World of Sports in Orlando. So I had the opportunity to go to Disney, where I worked there. I was there for a few months, and there were some internal changes that forced me to come back to New Jersey, and I landed a job at the NBA, at the National Basketball Association. So I spent quite a few years working at the league level, which was great because I had worked at the team level and then worked at the league level. So from a diversified background perspective, I felt really good. And, you know, I'm a lover of basketball, so what else could I ask for? So while I was working full-time at the NBA, I was going to school part-time to get my MBA, and I graduated with my degree and decided that, again, with the North Star of having a diversified background, I went and I worked for a media company. So I went to Nickelodeon to really understand the world of television and media and how that impacted marketing and the marketing landscape. Was at Nickelodeon for a little bit, and then went to work at HBO Sports, where I worked in the pay-per-view division, and really learned about direct marketing from a different perspective, because my job there was literally to get people to push a button on their remote to buy pay-per-view events, and really dove into multicultural marketing. So had a very successful run at HBO Sports. And back then, cell phones were becoming the third, we're bubbling up from the third screen to the second screen. And what I mean by that, that's some marketing jargon to say, the first screen is your television screen, your second is your computer screen, and the third is your mobile screen. So back then, the mobile screen was moving up to the second spot. So I had the opportunity to go work at AT&T and really learn the mobile business from a marketing perspective and a customer acquisition perspective. And that's when, back in 2010, I got a call from a recruiter, and they were looking to fill a director of marketing position at the Nets. And they were looking for someone to run marketing for the Barclays Center, which they were in the process of building. So I was lucky enough that when I went in to the interview, while I didn't think that I had the proper experience to run marketing for Barclays Center, the hiring manager during the interview said, "Oh, the director of marketing for the team just resigned, so we're looking to hire for the director of marketing for the Nets." And I remember leaving the interview and calling the recruiter and saying, "Hey, I don't know if you know this, but the director of marketing for the Nets just resigned. That's the job that I want." And I was lucky enough to start with the Nets, now the Brooklyn Nets, 18 months before their move to Brooklyn in November of 2010. I spent 7 incredible years there. But the best job. And I then, in 2017, was recruited by Apple. And, when Apple calls, you don't say no. So I went through that process, made the decision to leave the Nets, went to Silicon Valley, was there a month when my life completely turned upside down with Hurricane Maria that hit Puerto Rico. And I won't get into those details, but I had a very tough decision to make. And I came back to the East Coast to take care of my family, and took a job with Howard Hughes in New York. They were opening up a venue and reimagining the South Street Seaport District. Was just I thought, a fantastic opportunity. So took that job, was there a few months, and a former colleague from AT&T came to visit me and said to me at the end of the tour that I was giving him, he said, would you ever consider relocating again? And I said to him, I said, I will only relocate if it gets me closer to Puerto Rico. And he said, well, I know the gentleman that was just named, president of business operations for the Miami Marlins. He made an introduction, and I got the head of marketing and community relations position at the Miami Marlins, went there, was there for almost 2 years. And at the end of this January of 2020, I had the opportunity to be reunited with my former CEO from the Nets and Barclays Center, and that's how I joined Roc Nation. So that's kind of the story of my whole career path. And the key there is I was laser focused on having a diversified background, and I wanted to be able to sit at a table and discuss any type of marketing and feel educated and feel that I had the proper experience.
That's really cool. And that's actually really cool hearing about your whole journey. And the one major takeaway I took away from that is the diverse avenues you took to excel in that field of marketing. So the one follow-up I have for you as well is a lot of listeners know this from the past recordings. I'm very big on mentors. And along your way, have you ever had any mentors kind of guide you through the field, especially in the more of your beginning years to where you are today? And if you do, kind of what role did they play in your accomplishments in the field of marketing?
Well, I'll share with you that my very first boss, she was my boss when I started in the industry. And once I left, she quickly became my mentor. And she has been my mentor to this day. And it's interesting, she and I, stay in touch, and, I bounce ideas off of her. And so I would say she has been really instrumental in my journey. And it's interesting because when I think of mentors, I think of people that have not only have influenced your career, right, or your life or your path, but I also think about the team that I built when I was at the Nets. When I joined the Nets, there were 15 people in the marketing department, and by the time I left, there were 62. And I think of that diverse group of individuals, how they were mentors to me as well, because I believe that learning is a two-way street. So, I remember, we had hired the director of digital marketing, and I remember sitting and having conversations with her to understand, what made content, the best, in Facebook, or, what was the best type of content for Twitter, and looking at her as the expert to teach me. So I look at, while I've had one true mentor who has been instrumental and who has really, played a big role in my career track, I also look at the other folks that I've interacted with and have worked with that have, educated me along the way.
That's really cool. And then the next follow-up I have for you is mostly to anyone like myself and others that are pursuing a field in the sports industry, whether it's journalism or on the business side. Is the one common denominator in that is the ability that you have to be open to relocating. And when you were talking about your journey, you brought up how you preferred to relocate a little more south. And I wanted to ask you as well, is it more of do you see that as like a personal challenge, kind of relocating or having the ability to relocate, especially with certain positions along the road that you took to where you are today?
I think, it's really interesting because prior to my move, or prior to being recruited by Apple, I had relocated one time before that, right, which was to Orlando. And I made the decision to go to Orlando because working for Disney was, when you think of the Disney brand, specifically from our marketing perspective, I mean, that's just a once in a lifetime opportunity. But I think that for you and for your listeners, I think relocating is part of the challenge, is part of the growth opportunity. You know, when I relocated to Miami, I thought to myself, wow, I'm in a market that's 73% Latino. This is going to be great. Baseball is huge in the Latino population. Like, we shouldn't have, despite the history of the team, we're going to really turn this around. And the reality of it is that unless, once you move into a market, you need to understand the audience. You need to understand your fans. You need to know, where they eat, where they dine, what they do on the weekends. So I think that that's part of the overall challenge of working in sport, is really, understanding the market along with the fan base.
That's really cool. Yeah, that's good. That's great advice.
And in addition to the advice on relocating, what kind of advice would you give to those in the field that either are looking into it for the first time or are ready to take that next level step like you did on more than several occasions?
I think so. For those that are looking to get into the industry, I think it's really important that you research. So, for example, if you're looking, I'm going to take the creative track. If you're looking to be a designer within the world of sport and you want to work at the team level, do your research and understand, who are the people that are in those positions? How did they get there? Really understand their career track. And if you want to work at the league level, look at it from that perspective. So researching people that are in the positions that you wish to pursue, I think that's really important. And I think that for those that are in the industry that are looking to level up, if you will, I think my advice would be to whatever position you're in is to add value, is to deliver, to over deliver on your job. Yes, you have a job description. Yes, you have duties that you need to be, that you need to execute, but what can you bring to the table that's going to help move the business forward in a relevant manner that's going to provide value for whatever team or league you're working at?
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. So can you talk a little bit about your 7 years with the Nets and then which became more of Brooklyn Sports and Entertainment, BSE, and what were some of your favorite memories and accomplishments?
Yeah, so I think that my 7 years at the Nets were incredible. I think that being, for someone who works in sports, the ability to rebrand a team and open up an arena at the same time is a once in a lifetime opportunity. I don't think that those come very often, that those two things intercept and happen the same season. So from that perspective, the team that opened up Barclays Center in September of 2012, we will forever be a special group of people. And when I think about my favorite moments from working with the Nets, leading the brand transformation of the Nets from Jersey to Brooklyn was an incredible labor of love, incredible journey. I learned so much through that process, just in terms of consumer behavior, consumer insights, making sure that we did the right thing since we only had one shot, one opportunity. And it was interesting because when I started with the Nets, I only oversaw the team, and 14 months into my tenure, I was promoted to vice president. So I was overseeing the team and the arena. So that was a learning moment for me, because while I knew the world of entertainment, I had spent the majority of my time on the team side. So learning the arena business, learning the music business, working with promoters, working with agents and managers, that was a whole new world that I was exposed to. So I would say specific pivotal moments during my tenure there, April 30th, when we launched the Hello Brooklyn campaign and we unveiled the logo. That was an unbelievable moment. When we opened up Barclays Center on September 28th, the first Jay-Z concert, and selling out 8 consecutive concerts was amazing. Fast forward to moving the Islanders from Nassau to Brooklyn, the first playoff game of the New York Islanders and Barclays Center was incredible. Hockey is so different than basketball. So I think that when I look at, there were other moments, but I think that those 3 were so pivotal and life-changing, just in regards to, being there and just witnessing that I could say that those were 3 of my favorite moments.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The Hello Brooklyn, as I learned, was an award-winning campaign. So it really stuck with me. I remember the first time interacting with the Nets was on Twitter the summer beforehand. And I remember exactly where I was on the roof of my parents' building. So definitely stuck in using Hello Brooklyn. It's I'm biased because I'm from Brooklyn. So that pride is to an extreme level at times. So what were some of the aspects of that branding that just made it so impactful for you, besides the logo and the campaign itself? Like, what things really stood out to you?
Well, I think that from a strategic standpoint, we knew that Brooklyn Knights were hungry for a team to call their own, since we had calculated it had been 43 years since the Dodgers had left Brooklyn to go to LA. We knew that Brooklyn Knights are very prideful, and they consider themselves, they don't consider themselves to be like Brooklyn Knights or Manhattan Knights, or people who live in Manhattan or in Queens. We just knew that the pride of the borough and Brooklyn, the brand Brooklyn itself, stood on its own. So because we knew that we only had one time to launch, we wanted to make sure that the voice of the team came from within the borough. We didn't want to be seen as the big bad, NBA coming into this borough, and that, we were going to tell Brooklyn Knights that this was their team, that they had to cheer for us. We wanted to come in a very humble manner. And when you meet someone, what's the first thing that you say? Hello, my name is, or hello, how are you doing? So the simplicity of just saying hello was what made it so effective. And when you combine Hello Brooklyn, when you combine those 2 words, which, by the way, the campaign and the slogan was inspired by a Jay-Z song, Hello Brooklyn. And I remember listening to that video, or listening to the song on a video that had been sent to me by our internal creative director. And it was just so impactful, and the simplicity is just so beautiful, that when, we decided to pitch it and it stuck, we were just really excited to bring it to life the way that we did.
Yeah, no, definitely. It still resonates to this very day. And one thing I recall, because Barclays Center wasn't officially ready to be opened yet, is the introducing of the Brooklyn's backcourt was at Brooklyn Borough Hall. So can you talk about that day a little bit?
Yeah, so, I think it's important to say that when we launched the Brooklyn Nets in Brooklyn, we only had 4 players on our roster. We didn't even know whether Darren Williams was going to be signing with the team when we launched. So when Darren announced that he was coming back, and then when we signed Joe Johnson, it was like, okay, this is Brooklyn's backcourt. How are we going to introduce them to the fans? We're in Brooklyn, close to the site of Barclays Center. Will it be impactful for us to have a celebration and really be part of the community? So Borough Hall was the perfect location. And I just remember that day, we just felt like we were part of the community. We had groups that came out there, we had our mobile truck, we had merchandise, and it was just such a good feeling. and it was the first step in what we wanted to accomplish, which was to really weave the Brooklyn Nets brand into the fabric of the borough of Brooklyn.
Yeah. I mean, the pictures, still resonate to this day.
This podcast episode is brought to you by Anchor. Anchor is an app that allows podcast producers to record and create original content. It is free to record and create a podcast, giving producers the ability to easily edit their material off their phone or computer. Anchor allows producers and talent to make money off their work with no minimum listenership. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you on platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and many more. To get started, Anchor app or go to anchor.fm. Anchor for Doug and I has been great and allows us to bring unique, creative, and opinionated content to listeners of the Wingspan Podcast.
So then jumping forward back to Barclays Center. So what was it like, opening for all those concerts, and then the Nets kind of had a delay of game from Sandy. So what was that like?
So opening up Barclays Center was an unbelievable experience. I remember walking the arena the Sunday before and remembering that there seemed to be so much that needed to be done. And the construction team kept saying, yes, it'll be done. And for anyone who has been through, building a home or, just any renovating your apartment, it's just like if you're not in that space, you're like, there's no way that that's going to get done. But everything got done for that first night of the Jay-Z concert for when we opened up on Friday night. And seeing the arena come to life with fans in it, the concession stands open. And look, there were areas of opportunity after we opened in terms of lines and concession stands, speed of service. There were definitely things that needed to be worked on. But for those of us who had never opened up a building, it was just seeing, over 17,000 people in that building was just an incredible experience.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really successful season because you guys made the playoffs. So what was that like from your perspective? First season, you jump right into the playoffs.
Yeah, so it was really exciting. And one thing that I'll share with you and your listeners, which, Doug, I'm not even sure if you know this, but Superstorm Sandy hit, and I was commuting from the suburbs of New Jersey to Brooklyn, and I was literally trapped in my home for 2 weeks. So I missed our home opener, our first year, because I could not get from my home to Brooklyn. So I missed our opening night. So the fact that I was there for the opening of Barclays Center was really amazing. So fast forward to the playoffs, I think from our perspective, we were just so excited that our first year in Brooklyn, that the team was playing so well and that we were able to give the borough the best, NBA playoff basketball. And from that perspective, working on the business side and thinking of the fan experience, we wanted to make sure that we put forth the best entertainment, the best experience, because we wanted the borough to know that this was a team that they could rally around.
Yeah, no, definitely. And how much of a surprise was it that the Nets Celtics trade happened? Like, from your perspective, what did you know about the trade potential, and what are your thoughts on after the fact?
Well, I knew nothing about the trade. We knew something was happening because since I led the marketing department, we had to create assets. However, we didn't know until the very, very last minute who we were trading for. And I think that, having Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce, their credentials and coming to Brooklyn was just, it was proof that the ownership group at the time was willing to invest to make sure that they had a winning team. So I think that from that perspective, it was very, very exciting. And look, we knew where the players were in terms of, their career, their tenure in their career. However, it was a very, very exciting time for us.
Yeah, no, definitely. It was certainly fun. Even though they fell short, it was a very, very fun season.
Yeah.
And then what was it like after the fact? Because as you mentioned at the time, we were expecting, a continuation of that type of brand of winning.
Yeah, look, I think that afterwards, the reality of it is that for anyone who's a sports fan knows that, winning cures it all, right? However, us falling short wasn't the end of the world. It just opened up what I see as it opened up more opportunities for us in terms of making adjustments, whatever those were on the basketball operations side, which clearly I'm not an expert in that realm. However, we trusted the folks that were, leading the basketball operations side to make the best decision to put a winning team on the court.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And then to kind of stay in that same avenue, we'll kind of dive into some Long Island Nets. So when the team got purchased, it kind of was in that stage of being built and ready to launch in 2015. And then obviously, as we all know, they played in the Barclays Center their first season. But can you talk about kind of that division, getting that at that time would be called a D-League team? But from a marketing standpoint, what that kind of propelled to the whole Nets franchise, the whole Nets brand as well?
Yeah, so I think that from our perspective, having a G League team was something that, we, from a marketing perspective, we opened with open arms, because the way that we saw it was now we were going to have a system in place where players were going to have an opportunity to improve within the Nets branding. So the Long Island Nets, came to fruition, and we helped their marketing team and their team kind of launch that brand, if you will. But it felt like the only way to sum up the way that experience was like, now we had a little brother that we had to take care of. And however, that little brother was going to provide opportunities for, if the players needed to, if they weren't cutting it at the Nets level, they were going to go, be part of the G League team to improve their skills. And they weren't going somewhere else. They were staying within the family.
That's interesting. And something that correlates well, which is my next follow-up, in the same avenue as Long Island Nets, is almost opening up NYCB Live, which is the home of the Nassau Veterans Memorial Coliseum. So can you just talk about kind of opening that arena and like what the impact did as well, having a Nets team represent on a different area of that town in Long Island?
Yeah, absolutely. So the opening of NYCB Live was also another great experience, under my experience as part of Brooklyn Sports and Entertainment. And when you think about, the Nets history, tying it back to Long Island, I think that was key for us, just in terms of the nostalgic of the Nets brand. And I think that what's interesting is that as we were going through the process of that arena being transformed to its current state, we wanted to make sure that people walking into that arena knew that that arena was within the Barclays Center family. Similar to when you walk into a Wynn hotel, it doesn't matter whether you walk into it in Las Vegas or, any other location, that you're in a Wynn property. So the consistency was really key for us. The architecture was key. And what's really special about that venue is that when you look at the inside, it really reflects Long Island, because it feels not that it's, it just has that feeling of that you're near the beach, the bright colors, the light wood. It just felt it was reflective of the geographic location where the building sits.
That's really cool. That's cool. And then my question, kind of as an outsider now, someone that stepped away from the Nets organization and seeing how it resonated in Long Island, obviously the rise of the G League, how impactful do you think that is even today, now that obviously the Nets have a bigger brand name as in Brooklyn, with what we'll talk about later on with them landing Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving. But how, in your own thoughts, at least about today, with their G League team rising each year, and like last year they made it to the championship game, can you just talk a little about how that even reflects onto the Nets brand as well? I know you talked about it a little earlier as well.
Yeah, I think, I'll make an analogy here to baseball, which was the last sport that I worked in, is when you think about baseball and you think about the farm system, where owners invest in getting the players that are in the farm system the best programs, so that when they go to the major leagues, they're really prepared and they're put in a position to really compete. When I think of the Long Island Nets, I make a similar correlation, because the Nets organization they've invested in their G League team as part of their developmental path for those that are going to play in the NBA. So I think that the team there has done a really good job. And clearly, by the success of the Long Island Nets, you can see that that's validated. And to your point of them making it to the championship game last year, that proves or validates their theory of using it as a developmental platform for them.
Yeah.
Really cool. That's cool.
That makes sense. So jumping back just a little bit, so Sean Marks and Kenny Atkinson were kind of part of that early phase that really helped develop Long Island Nets and the Brooklyn Nets as well. So from your perspective, how impactful were they? And looking to today, it seems like you guys as a whole organization made amazing decisions.
Yeah, so I think that the hiring of Sean Marks and Kenny Atkinson, really solidified the thought process that we were going to change the culture in Brooklyn. And, we wanted to win, and it was about winning. And as you're building a team, you have to look at not only talent, but you have to look at characteristics of players. So, when you look at Sean Marks' history playing for, working alongside Greg Popovich at the San Antonio Spurs, those players and that culture speaks for itself, right? I mean, I have the utmost respect for Popovich and, the way that he, I want to say, coaches and manages that team. So I think that Sean coming from that type of institution was really great for us. And I think that at the time, Kenny was the right coach. He was young, he was hungry, and he exuded the characteristics that any winning team would look for. So I think that it was the perfect combination at the time. I had the pleasure of working with Sean, not a long extent, because I was only there for a short period of time and left after he got hired. But it's been really, really good to see what they're building in Brooklyn. And clearly the signing of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, solidifies again and validates what they're building there. And it's about winning. It's about putting the right pieces in place to win. And Kenny and Sean did that.
No, for sure. And then that's actually a perfect lead into what our next topic is going to be. Kind of fast forward a little bit, but we're going to talk about most of the current state of the Nets. As an outsider, like you talked about, as Kevin Durant and Kyrie are kind of solidifying that final stage, I guess you could say. But what's kind of your opinions on the current state of the Nets, as either your fan side of basketball, or even the business side of basketball? Kind of what's your overall thoughts on what the Nets franchise, even the teams, is doing today?
Well, look, I think it's amazing that the Brooklyn Nets were able to sign Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. So I'm thrilled. I'm so happy for the team. And despite the fact that I'm no longer there, I still have a really special, the Nets hold a special place in my heart because of my history with the team. So from a basketball perspective, my hope is that, they put the final pieces in place, whatever those pieces may be. And, when the play resumes, that they win, because I think that, from a fan perspective, they're my team and I want them to win. And I think that from a business side, my observation is that, the brand of the Brooklyn Nets continues to grow and be infused within the borough, because I think that's so critical when I think of the equity that brand Brooklyn holds, and to have a professional sports team win and have the borough behind it, I think is something that my hope is that they continue to do.
That's cool. And then I guess we could trace it back to last summer. What was your reaction when you found out the news that the Nets are going to do the clean sweep and sign Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and then DeAndre Jordan, the kind of the rest of the free agent class that they did acquire during free agency? What was kind of your initial reaction to seeing that?
I was like, great for them. I'm so excited. Yay, Sean Marks is what I was thinking, because that, thinking of, and again, from an outsider's perspective, thinking what that process must have had to be like, what they must have gone, whatever their process was to recruit the players. It was just, they had gotten to the point where the right players want to play there. So I was very, very happy for Sean and his team and for the organization overall.
And then with my final kind of follow-up on this is kind of a little bit different. It's kind of tracing back to what you were talking about, since you did live in New Jersey, like you mentioned during the time. And as someone who lives in the Bergen County area and kind of grew up a New Jersey Nets fan, went down Route 17 to the Meadowlands and everything to go watch them. And I guess you could say a couple months ago, rumors started to swirl that the Nets are trying to revive their fan base in New Jersey. So as someone who's really excelled and has been mostly a big part of the Nets marketing department and everything when you were there, what are kind of your suggestions or tips or even your thoughts on the Nets possibly going back over New Jersey and kind of rebuilding that fan base, kind of putting it together like a puzzle, like how it used to be?
Well, I think, my first initial thought from a business perspective is that I would love to see the data that backs that theory up. Like what's the driver for making that decision? And I think that, back when I was there, we had data that showed us that only 10% or less of the season ticket holders were going to follow us to Brooklyn. So it's interesting to me. It's an interesting case study. However, I think that, when I just recall when I took the job at the Nets and I said, the team is going to eventually move to Brooklyn. I remember people in New Jersey saying Brooklyn is like, they made it seem like Brooklyn was another country. And I think that unless you've gone to Brooklyn and you see how easy it is to get to Barclays Center, via mass transit, I mean, the arena sits above a transportation hub, so it's really easy to get to. And I just think that if they're going to go back to their roots, I just hope that my hope is that they do it in the most relevant and impactful way to get people into the seats at Barclays Center.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. From my understanding, from the people I've hang out with, there's been I don't know the percentage of things, but it definitely seems like a strong base in New Jersey has stayed steady, and not that many people filtered off, and some even may have rejoined the fold. Maybe that's because they tried the Knicks out recently for a little bit. I don't know. But some of the aspects that the Nets brought up was throwback jerseys. They brought back a little bit more merch, and then having that the fun one that I don't think will get used is Swamp Dragons. So first, let's start with the Swamp Dragons because that's a fun one. Like, what were your thoughts when you learned about that?
Well, it's interesting because I know the creative director at the NBA who had drawn that up, and I thought that it was really interesting. And from that perspective, I look at it from like a one-time opportunity, right? I think that here, from a merchandise perspective, one of the things, let me just sidestep for a second. One of the things that I'm really, really proud of the work that I did in Brooklyn was the fact that merchandise sales were through the roof and that we had become a lifestyle brand. So wearing the black and white was really, really cool. And when I think about the Swamp Dragons, I think that having that be, a special night, a theme night, to me, from a merchandise perspective, makes sense. And, it's going to be interesting to see, whether they do it or not. I just think it's an interesting concept. And when I think of it from the lens of merchandise sales and moving things off a shelf, that could be something that could help continue to drive merchandise sales.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I don't see it as like an actual on-court, maybe for the Long Island Nets. I always joke that when they were deciding that they could have been the Gowanus Nets, because Swamp Dragon, Gowanus is completely green and disgusting.
Yeah.
Practically like a swamp, so it worked for me. But I do think that fans would indeed buy the merch, even if it's not something that's on the court. I do think it would be a strong seller off the court because it's so unique and flavorful.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
And then one big thing that you were a strong supporter of is the Brooklyn Brigade, which transitioned and kind of joined in with what became the Brooklyn Block. So can you talk about your connection with the fans and how you helped, them grow to the point where they stand out more than just some loud fans in the crowd?
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought that the concept of the Brooklyn Brigade was amazing. And the fact that the leader of that group made an investment on his own, and the love that he had for the Nats, which it was something that he was willing to grow on his own. And, for the first few years, and I remember distinctly sitting at lunch with the leader of the group where, he made it crystal clear that he wanted the team to be at arm's length, that this was something that was very fan-centric. And I respected that. And from our perspective, inside the organization, look, we wanted to grow the fan base, right? We want the fans to cheer for this team. So the things that we were able to do to amplify their voice within the arena was really important to us. So whether it was, moving them to a more desirable location within the game so that the cameras could have access to them to show them on the video board, whether it was the opportunity for them to meet our executives, whether it was an opportunity for them to meet Sean Marks. I think all of those things were really part of growing a fan base. And, it's really interesting that from my perspective, the group was very small when it started, and it was great, that I would walk the concourse and I would see members of the brigade. I remember, I think it might have been our second season or our third season. Keep me honest on this one, Doug, but we did a whole photo shoot with the brigade that we used in our marketing campaign because we wanted to showcase the love that, this group had for us. And when you think about the supporter groups in soccer, it was like, okay, if we could be the NBA team that bubbles that up and really, has that within their arena, then, that to us was going to be really, really successful. And, to this day, I follow a lot of the folks on Twitter and I see, the banter back and forth. And it's actually nice to see how now what has evolved to the Brooklyn Block how the team really supports it. And, every time that I see video of Sean Marks delivering goodies to the section, it's like, okay, you know what? They're getting bigger and bigger. And look, it's all about, if at the end of the day, we're all in it because we have a passion and a love for the Brooklyn Nets, then how could that be something that you don't support?
Yeah. Bobby has done an amazing job.
Yeah.
Wonderful guy. And I think it was year 3 where we did the marketing campaign where it was Brigade and other fans where they would go to Barclays, take some pictures, and we were all over the city. So someone's found me on a taxi cab, which was so funny to this day. And then it was posted all around. It may have been a different one where those pictures were used on the garage-like doors of the Coney Island store, Net store. And then there was at least one game where there was a recording where the rally cry of some Brigade members to hype up the fans on the Jumbotron. Game versus Phoenix. So all those like amazing things, like to have such cohesion with the fan base and organization is a beautiful sight to see. So definitely want to thank you for being a huge part of that.
Yeah, well, I think just one last note to close that loop. I think that to this day, the fact that I can still have interaction with members of the Brooklyn Brigade on Twitter and still feel very organic and still feel like it's a place where I belong. I thank you for that opportunity, because I think, as I mentioned earlier, from my perspective, I think everything is a two-way street. So thank you for that, Doug.
And then my question, I guess you could say my question, kind of a look ahead in the future for you personally, as someone who's been well experienced in the industry of sports, especially on the business side. As of now, looking ahead, do you think that or do you ever see yourself returning to either the Nets organization themselves or even some type of job in the NBA?
Here's how I'll answer that. My hope is that my journey continues and leads me to the place where my passion and my love for marketing can continue to thrive. That's how I'll answer that question.
That's fair.
That's very fair. That's very fair. And then to get your opinion on the latest topic, especially revolving around the NBA and mostly all of sports. Obviously, every league's different. But as of now, do you think that the NBA should resume, or are you on the side of they should scrap the season?
No, I think that they should resume. I think that, look, I think we'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge the racial tensions that are happening in this country from a social justice perspective. I'm a huge supporter of Black Lives Matter. I think that, I think that it's time for change. And I won't turn this into a political conversation. However, the return of the NBA will do multiple things. One, it will give us sports fans, a sense of normalcy. We want to see our players play. We want to see live action. And I think that the NBA, when in play, has a greater platform for players to really use their platform to create change. I know that, I think back to, Black History Month, for example, when the players have specific warm-up shirts that, give a nod to Black History Month or Autism Month. Those are the things that if you're not playing, you're not able to leverage your platform. So I'm on the side of let's get them back sooner rather than later. And them playing, I've read a lot of comments from players that, they feel that it would be a distraction. My humble opinion is that it won't be a distraction. I think that they can leverage the platform to really continue to deliver the message and to evoke the change that's needed in this country.
Yeah, and as a very strong player league, I do think they have that power, and I'll support them now no matter what. But I do think giving them that stage, more people may tune into a basketball game than the news itself. And you knowing that what power they have to advocate for Black Lives Matter, all eyes will be on them. So at that point, it's up to them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Most definitely. That's a good note to end it on. But thank you we can't thank you much more again for coming on, hopping on with me and Doug and talking sports and much more. We really appreciate you taking some time out of your evening to talk to Doug and I.
Yeah, well, thank you both so much for the opportunity. I'm excited to, be a part of this, specifically since we're talking about something that all three of us love and share a passion for. So thank you again for the opportunity, and best of luck.
Of course.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks. Okay,
so,
bye-bye.
All right, Chris, time to give the closing remarks.
Yeah, so guys, feel free to remember to send over any suggestions, questions, comments, or thoughts on any of our content by sending an email to wingspanpodcast@gmail.com. And guys, do not forget to follow us on our social media accounts. But most importantly, make sure you subscribe to our podcast on your preferred listening service. And you guys know, as for next time, stay classy and take care.